You know what? I'm going to take back control of my life financially. I'm going to move in a positive direction. I'm not going to let anything or anyone hold me back. The difference between you getting stressed or staying relaxed financially is who controls the banking function in your life. You don't have to put your money in prison for decades and rely upon someone else to achieve the financial abundance that you deserve today. The whole idea of the infinite banking concept for Canadians is to recapture the interest, the money that you're paying to banks, to finance companies, for all those major items that you need throughout your lifetime. And the objective is to change the flow and to keep that money coming back to your family. What I'd like to do is just kick things off by diving straight into describing for you who R. Nelson Nash was, because R. Nelson Nash, being the founder, the developer of the process of becoming your own banker, for most people who are first exposed to the concept, the infinite banking concept, they really have no idea who R. Nelson Nash was. I want to ask all of you a question. If you were to think of who revolutionized the automobile industry with the Model T, what name comes to mind?
Henry Ford.
Henry Ford. And think about who created amusement parks and pioneered cartoon films, including Mickey Mouse. Who comes to mind?
Walt Disney.
And Walt Disney is the right answer. And Walt Disney actually got his theme parks started through the use of policy loans, because no bank would lend him money. They thought that he was a little bit, they felt like he had a few empty rooms for rent up between his head bone when he was describing this dream that he had to open this theme park. And so it was through the use of policy loans that he was able to get his dream started. And look at what it's blossomed into today. Now, I'd like to ask you this question, and it's a trick question. Who revolutionized the process to enable you to become your own banker? Who developed and pioneered the infinite banking concept?
Nelson Nash.
You got it. And Nelson Nash, we certainly cannot overstate just how amazing R. Nelson Nash was, and that he really stood among giants, and he was a real pioneer, a real revolutionary pioneer in helping people to take control of the banking function as it relates to their needs, to implement this process of becoming your own banker, the infinite banking concept. And what Nelson often remarked, and he began to say this way back in 1994, what a peaceful, stress-free way of life it is when you get the banks out of your life. And he meant that he didn't want to rely upon the commercial banking system for anything other than the convenience of debit. So when he needed access to money to take advantage of opportunity that tracked him down, to help his family, to grow wealth in his family, to take care of all of his personal financial needs, he didn't want to be dependent upon a commercial bank to do that. He wanted to be in a position of total control. And where he needed the banking system was for the convenience of debit. And we're going to share a little bit more about Nelson's journey and what led to the creation of this process. That's all part of pouring a strong foundation. You'll know that you're capable of becoming your own banker. You'll have clarity on the problem, which we're going to pour that foundation right now. You'll understand the solution. It'll actually matter to you. And you'll understand, most importantly, what you can do about it. And you'll feel like I found hope, I found a new belief in a way that I can create my own peaceful, stress-free way of life. And what is the opposite of stress-free? I think we've all experienced this, especially over the past few years with everything that we've been enduring. And so let's help you to create your peaceful, stress-free way of life financially. Now, all of you would know at some point, because you've been told to put your money into things like mutual funds, stocks, bonds, cryptocurrencies, commodities, real estate, the list goes on and on and on, that your money has to reside somewhere. So you've been told to put it into a variety of different things. You know, you've heard the word diversification. You should be diversified. If you want to hand over control, if you want an absence of control financially in your life, then you should diversify the absence of control. Just hand your money over to a bunch of other people who think that they can do better with it than you can. And what I'm here to say to all of you is that if you just think about this for a moment, just process this. You're earning an income, and then you take a portion of that income, you hand control of that money over to someone else who applies it toward an investment of some kind. That money is trapped. You can't regain access to it without liquidating some or all of the investment, without triggering some taxable event. And then when you need ready access to money, you have to go to someone else's bank to gain access to it. I just want you to take a moment and process that. Just really think about that. I make money, I invest it, which means I got to hand control over to someone else. And then when I need ready access to money, I got to go to someone else's bank for it. It's absurd. And I'm telling you that if you've been handing control of your money over to someone else who thinks they can do better with it than you can, you might not be in the best situation right now. But it's not your fault. It's going to be okay. We're going to help you through that today. We're going to help you understand that there's a better way to go about things financially. Now, one question that I'd like to ask, are you committed to rethink your thinking today? Are you willing to commit to improve anything that you're already now doing financially that may be preventing you from becoming your own banker, that may be preventing you from implementing the infinite banking concept? Are you willing to commit to improve anything that you're now doing financially that may be preventing you from doing that? Now, I want to share with everybody in terms of what led me to being introduced to this process. I went through a journey in life that many of you may relate to. You may be able to relate to what I'm about to share. And I want you to know first and foremost, and I'm speaking to you directly, that you truly deserve a life of no regrets. And if you know someone who's lived a life of regret, or maybe you know someone that you associate with where you think, my goodness, if you don't pursue change in your life, positive change, if you don't move in a different direction, you're going to wake up one morning regretting that. I want to date myself a little bit. I want to take you back to September of 2006. And at that time, I resided in Sherwood Park, Alberta, which is a bedroom community just outside of the city of Edmonton. And I was standing in this empty, dark living room, and I was staring out at a sold sign on the front lawn. And now you're my invisible partner. So you're standing right next to me and staring out that window with me. And I was feeling, at that time, I was feeling stressed. I felt like a failure financially. I was under a lot of pressure, and I would have never have expected to be here after doing all the things right financially. How was it possible that doing everything right got me here? That's what was going through my mind in that moment. And a few years before that, I was 30 years young. My first marriage, which I now refer to as my practice marriage. I had a mortgage. I was ambitious, very ambitious about my future, worked in a corporate job. Up to that point in my life, I was doing everything that mainstream financial advice told me was the right thing to do. And over the course of those next few years, life decided to hand me several big challenges all at once. My first marriage was over. I was deeply in debt. I was on the brink of financial ruin as a result of my marriage dissolving. I endured the unexpected passing of both my mom and my father, suddenly and unexpectedly. And these are some of the most stressful events that you can experience over the course of a lifetime. And it happened to me in just a few short years. Standing alone in that empty, dark living room, A, it was a very painful experience, but B, I didn't know who to turn to for help. And I would ask you, if you were in that situation, what would you have done? And just when I felt in that moment like I had hit rock bottom, I remembered something that my late dad used to say to me. He would say, son, don't ever be found guilty of giving up on yourself. And those words ring true with me even to this day. And I made that decision in that moment, standing right there. I made that decision. I said, you know what? I'm going to take back control of my life financially. I'm going to move in a positive direction. I'm not going to let anything or anyone hold me back. And in 2008, I was contacted by a friend of mine in the United States, and Matt, at that time, very successful entrepreneur, still is to this day. And he had reached out and he had said, hey, we're going to attend this event. It was a 3-day conference. And the topic was what I later learned to be the process of becoming your own banker, the infinite banking concept. And I didn't have the money to attend that event, but determined, to follow Matt. I mean, success leaves clues, and determined to make positive change. I said, you know what, I'm going to do whatever it takes to go. And I made the right choice and I attended. And I left that conference after the third day with a firm belief that every Canadian should hear about this process. I just wasn't sure whether or not it would even work in Canada. So what I did in coming back to Canada, I began to implement that process in my own life, and everything changed for the better. And today I'm remarried to my beautiful wife, Rebecca. We have 4 young children. I no longer feel stressed financially. My family and I, we are in total control of our money. We're no longer worried about the ups and downs of markets or economic cycles or real estate cycles or global pandemics. And because of this process, my family and I, and all of the clients that I'm privileged to serve who embrace this process and who implement it in their lives, we'll never have another bad financial day in our lifetimes. And while I'm alive and long after I'm gone. And so I believe that the financial control should be in your hands. It shouldn't be in the bank's hands. It shouldn't be in a loan officer's hands. And it certainly shouldn't be in the hands of a temperamental market or the government. And so in the next few hours, my teammates and I, we're going to take the past 13 years of time, money, and energy that we've spent becoming experts in this process to show you exactly how we've helped thousands of people just like you to build your peaceful, stress-free way of life. Quite well known that, especially, in today's world, that most people, and you might even believe this yourself, that you need someone else to take care of your money, and that most people believe that it's necessary to risk their money in order to grow it. And most people know next to nothing about the process of banking and its importance to their lives and to their well-being. Now, here are a few fundamental truths that are really going to set the stage. The first is the difference between you getting stressed or staying relaxed financially is who controls the banking function in your life. That's truth number one. Truth number two is that you don't have to put your money in prison for decades. So if you think about storing your money inside of tax qualified plans or investments that are locked in or that you have uneasy access to, you don't have to put your money in prison for decades and rely upon someone else to achieve the financial abundance that you deserve today. That's a fundamental truth number two. And number three, as Nelson Nash often said, you don't have to be rich to become your own banker. And as one of my colleagues in the US, Brent Kessler, often says, I don't care if you make $10 an hour or $10,000 an hour. Once you understand this process, you have an obligation to implement this in your family. Otherwise, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. And if you don't implement it, regardless of how much or how little you're making, you can get started. And if you don't do that, Brent's belief is that you're actually stealing from your family now and from future generations. And that will become clearer to you when you see the examples, the case studies that we go through. Now, who is this process for? Who is the infinite banking concept for Canadians? Who is it for? It's for you. And it's important to understand, as Richard mentioned earlier, it's really important to understand how this process got started, because often we interact with people who say, look, I've been watching videos, I've been consuming podcasts, and I just give me the Reader's Digest version. Just tell me what this is so I can get started. That is one way of penalizing yourself. Because if we just did that, if we just spent 10 minutes today and said, hey, let's just tell you the crux of this concept and let's dive right into the numbers. Well, unless you have a firm understanding of the problem, the solution just won't matter to you. And so we're going to focus on that. Let's begin with how the concept started. In the 1980s, inflation rates skyrocketed. And what ended up happening is that lending rates, so interest rates, peaked at 21.5% if you were a prime customer. Now, I haven't met anybody who's prime. I've met a lot of people who are prime plus, but never anybody who's prime. And with interest rates peaking at 21.5%, I can share with you from firsthand experience growing up as a toddler at that time, my parents argued all the time about money. And we lived in this semi-detached duplex home. And the purchase price, I believe, I remember my mom telling me it was just north of $30,000 when they bought the house. And when these interest rates skyrocketed, my parents couldn't afford the mortgage payment. So my dad's response to things was to just work more, be away from the home more, and do everything possible to keep a roof over our heads. And we nearly lost the home on more than one occasion. And so this brings back a lot of painful memories for me. And so many people, so many families in Canada suffered. And many people just walked into the bank and put the keys on the counter and said, take the house. We can no longer afford it. Knowing what you're going to learn today, if you implement this in your life, you can shield yourself financially from future catastrophes, whether it's inflation related, economy related, market related, tax related. You can shield yourself from these events altogether. And what Nelson found himself in a bad position, he owed $500,000 in mortgage debt because he was quite actively involved in real estate investing at that time. And he thought to himself, how am I going to get myself out of this mess? Because every single month, I've got to pay a lot more interest than what I had planned to pay. And his joint venture partner in these real estate projects was a very prominent attorney. That joint venture partner filed for bankruptcy. He just threw in the towel and said, listen, I'm bowing out. So Nelson was receiving advice from people like, Nelson, why don't you just sell the real estate? And he thought, what fool is going to buy these properties from me when they have to go and finance with another bank at these ridiculous rates of interest? So he really thought about and understood that, okay, A, I've got a problem. And B, the problem is not the problem. The problem is how I'm thinking about the problem. Now, this is something that you might want to write down. You might want to capture this as a key teaching point. The problem is never the problem. The problem is how you think about the problem. And so what Nelson didn't realize is that the solution to the problem was right in front of him. He had already amassed a number of dividend-paying, participating whole life insurance contracts that had accumulated cash value. Now, he had a significant amount of cash value that had piled up, and he could borrow against that accumulation without withdrawing it from his policies. He could borrow against that accumulation on demand and on his own terms. So he was able to gain access to money from the life insurance companies, anywhere between 5 to 8%, to get rid of the commercial banks, or the snakes and dragons, as Nelson referred to them as. He could get rid of those commercial banks who were charging him more than 21.5%. So it took him 13 years to get rid of the commercial banks altogether. He could have done what his joint venture partner did. He could have filed an assignment in bankruptcy and walked away from it. But Nelson was a man of near perfect integrity, and he had no plans to do that. So he dug himself out of that mess, and he realized that everybody needs to know how to do this in their lives. Now, what most people don't know is that Nelson also had a life insurance policy on that joint venture partner. And so many years down the road, that joint venture partner passed away, and they had not been in business with one another for decades. This joint venture partner passes away. Nelson received a large tax-free windfall of death benefit. Did that not help him recover from the mistakes that he had made? Did that not help him recover the share that he paid for, that his joint venture partner bailed on? Nelson took care of all of that. So he ended up getting reimbursed later down the road with tax-free dollars plus so much more. And so this is so important to understand where this concept was born. And it was born by Nelson rethinking his thinking. I say that again. He was rethinking his thinking. And once he truly understood the problem, the solution became clear to him, and he knew exactly what to do. It's nothing new that you can take out a dividend-paying participating whole life policy, you can pile up cash value, you can access policy loans. That's nothing new. What Nelson didn't realize in that moment is that he had the best tool to get the job done of solving the problem. He already had the best tool in his hands. He just didn't really think about the problem in such a way that the tool presented itself as a solution to that problem. But once it happened, everything changed. And from that moment, Nelson and his wife, Mary, they did not rely upon a commercial bank for anything other than the convenience of debit for the rest of their lives. There were no outside loans in their family. Everything that they needed to finance was financed directly through the family banking system. Now, I would ask this question. Everyone needs a heart. Would you agree? Now, to expand a little bit more on Nelson. So Nelson, at a time in his life, he had to have his heart replumbed in 4 different places. And his heart was literally removed from his chest cavity to be replumbed and then put back in so that he could live a much longer, healthier life. And when he was under anesthetic and he was in surgery, he obviously doesn't recollect that experience. But what he did say is he said, you know what? I was alive. I was being kept alive by this heart and lung machine, but I wasn't truly living. I was only existing. I was just merely existing in that moment. I wasn't truly living. And what Nelson wants you to understand is that that's what most people are doing as it relates to the banking function in their lives. They're abdicating the responsibility of the function of banking. So think about the heart and lung machine. And they're more importantly abdicating the opportunity of the banking function as it relates to your own personal needs. So what most Canadians are doing is the equivalent of living off of a heart and lung machine as it relates to their financial life and how you go about doing things. It doesn't have to be that way. What I want to share with you is that banking in itself is the most important business in the world. Without it, everything financially comes to a grinding halt. We need to look no further back than the financial crisis of 2008. Without the process of banking continuing, the whole financial system would have collapsed. And the banking system itself is pumping money to where it's needed the most. So thinking about the heart. And at some point, it flows through your hands and mind, right? But where does all that money end up? So all the money that flows through your hands and mind, where does it all end up? Right back in the banking system. Thank you, Bern. The real issue here is how much of that function do you control as it relates to your needs? Now, Nelson taught us to rethink our thinking, and you've all committed to rethinking your thinking today. So here's a sharp example of that. There's only one pool of water, one body of water on planet Earth. And so if your belief is that the Amazon River is any different than the Indian Ocean, then here's what I would ask you to do in rethinking your thinking. We understand that moisture, so think about how moisture rises into the atmosphere. We have clouds that form. We have wind currents that move those clouds. At some point, those clouds precipitate in the form of rain, hail, snow, etc. The human body is comprised primarily of water. So we consume it, we expel it. It ends up right back into the rivers, lakes, creeks, streams, oceans. And that cycle continues over and over and over again. The same thing happens with the banking system. There's only one pool of money on the planet. It's inconsequential that there are many different institutions, many different currencies that handle the money. There's only one pool of money on the planet. And I want you to think about something. If you've ever seen stagnant water, if you've ever seen a body of stagnant water, it's just not in motion. Would you ever eat or drink anything that came out of stagnant water? If you ate or drank anything out of stagnant water, you'd likely get very ill. The teaching point here in rethinking our thinking is that motion is a natural law. So if water is not in constant motion, all life on planet Earth dies. If air is not constantly circulating, all life on planet Earth dies. If money is not constantly circulating through the financial system dies. If blood is not continually circulating through the human body, then you will die. And so we've got to keep money in constant motion, because money that isn't in motion isn't worth anything. And what the financial institutions that you're dealing with today, what they want you to do is give up the motion, right? So you give up the motion of your money, you hand over the money to that institution so that they can gain the motion of that money and accumulate and create wealth for the stockholders of the bank owners. We're going to put you in a position today where you're going to become the bank owner, and that money is going to flow back to you and to yours. Now, what Nelson saw is that he was pumping money into the pool the wrong way. He was doing it the wrong way. He had to go through bankers and toll takers and gatekeepers who were all making money off of him and abusing him. Has that ever happened to you? He realized that what he needed to do is he had to crank up large life insurance premiums. He already had a system. He needed to make it bigger, because remember, your money must reside somewhere. So he knew that he had the solution to the problem right in the grip of his hands. He just had to make his financial aquarium, his pool of capital, bigger. And you can't do this overnight. This is not a get rich quick anything. This is a get rich for sure. You cannot do this overnight. It has to be done incrementally and gradually over a period of time. Now, everyone at that time thought that he was nuts, including his wife, Mary. And you've got to get it done, but it just has to happen incrementally over a period of time. Now, what I'd like you to do is this next segment, I'd like you to capture this, and I want you to reference this in your thinking throughout the rest of today's boot camp. There are 4 characters in the financial play. Now, you may recall Shakespeare, where what was the comment that he made, Vern? Something about all the world is a stage and everyone is an actor thereon. Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right, Jason. Somewhere in that range.
Now, what I want to describe to you as it relates to your financial life is that there are 4 characters in the financial play. The first character is the depositor. Now, think about the depositor, because you are that character. You earn income, it flows through the books of someone else's bank. The moment that that deposit lands in the account, you're a depositor. The second character is the borrower. Even when you're paying cash for things, you're a borrower. You're always working with borrowed money. The third character is the banker. The banker decides who gets access to someone else's pile of money, what the terms are of that access, what the repayment schedule is going to be, what the interest rate's going to be, what the lending criteria is going to be, so on and so forth. Now, the banker's responsibility is to make money for the fourth character, the bank owner. And the bank owner, if you think of any of our large commercial banking institutions, they're publicly traded. So there are stockholders who have an expectation of profit. They have an expectation of participating in the divisible profit generated, and they want that profit showing up day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, decade in, decade out, century in, century out. And so what I shared with you earlier is in reference to what Nelson reminded us of, which is the golden rule, and that whomever has the gold makes all the rules. And the most important character in the financial play is the one who's making all the money, and that's the bank owner. The person on the street in Canada, they understand the subject so poorly that you're doing the equivalent of living off of a heart and lung machine. So what we all want to talk to you about is how to create a system in which you can control everything about the banking function as it relates to your needs. Now, this book titled Becoming Your Own Banker, it's a 92-page read, takes a little less than an afternoon to get through, over 500,000 copies sold, and it's self-published. I couldn't put together a list of 20 self-published authors who have sold 10,000 books. This book has sold more than 500,000 copies, and there's a reason for it. It works. And there's a real simple way to get your own copy. We are fully restocked. We just received several cases. Just a funny story, the printing company in the United States, the paper mill, they actually went out of business. And so the Nelson Nash Institute had to find an alternate printing resource, and we are fully restocked. So get your hands on a copy. You would have received a text message or a link to buy your own copy. We courier it. We don't mail it. We'll courier it anywhere it needs to go in Canada. pick up a copy for someone as well who you think would benefit from the gift of what you're learning here today. Now, the very first principle that must be understood is that you finance everything that you buy. There are no exceptions to this. You're either paying interest to someone else or you give up the interest that you could have otherwise earned. There are absolutely no exceptions to this rule. So you're going to hear us reference the term you either pay up or you give up. There are never any exceptions. The whole idea of the infinite banking concept for Canadians is to recapture the interest, the money that you're paying to banks, to finance companies, for all those major items that you need throughout your lifetime. And the objective is to change the flow and to keep that money coming back to your family. The infinite banking concept for Canadians is a process. It's not a product. You're going to hear a lot about the tool, dividend paying, participating whole life insurance, but I want you to understand that the infinite banking concept is a process. And becoming your own banker is not about addressing the yield of an investment. So this is not about, hey, should I become my own banker or should I invest in real estate? Should I become my own banker or should I put money into cryptocurrencies? Should I become my own banker or should I put my money into precious metals or mutual funds? This is not an either or. This process is meant to address how you go about financing the things in your life, which can certainly include investments. It's all about how. So we're not going to change whatever your objectives are. We just want you to understand there's a different way, there's a different method of going about achieving that objective. There's a different how. And that's the concept, the infinite banking concept for Canadians, the process of becoming your own banker. It's not a product.